Take the exit. Turn right into the drive-thru.
Nope, I'm making dinner tonight.
You don't have time. Josh has practice.
Oh, that's right. I'll just get a salad.
And fries?
No, just the salad.
But salad cancels fries.
Salad only.
Fries.
Salad.
Fries.
Food noise isn't fair, but Mochi Health is. The affordable GLP-1 source that puts you on the road to successful weight loss.
Hey, can I get the...
Fries.
Salad. Sorry.
Learn more at joinmochi.com. Mochi members have access to licensed physicians and nutritionists. Results may vary.
You know that thing where you get an amazing pair of shoes at a really great price and want to tell everyone about it? Yeah, so do we. Here at Designer Shoe Warehouse, we'll give you something to brag about, like the latest styles from brands you love, or the trends everyone's obsessing over, or shoes that make you feel like, well, you. So go ahead, show off a little. Find shoes that get you at prices that get your budget. Head to your DSW store or DSW.com today. DSW, let us surprise you.
Voices for Justice is a podcast that uses adult language and discusses sensitive and potentially triggering topics, including violence, abuse, and murder. This podcast may not be appropriate for younger audiences. All parties are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Some names have been changed or omitted per their request or for safety purposes. Listener discretion is advised.
My name is Sarah Turney, and this is Voices for Justice. Today, I'm discussing the case of the Dardeen family. Now, I do want to warn you up front that this is one of the worst, most gruesome cases I have ever covered on this podcast. But as always, it's an important one to highlight. In 1987, a young, beautiful family was brutally murdered in Ina, Illinois. A man has confessed to these crimes, but whether or not he did it is up for debate, and nearly 40 years later, it remains unsolved. This is the case of the Dardeen family. It's nearing the end of 1987, and the Dardeen family is ready to get out of Ina, Illinois. It's technically a village in Jefferson County with about 2,500 residents, and it's nearly 300 miles south of Chicago, which you might think would make it a sleepy community, a safe place to raise your kids. But there have been 15 homicides in the area over the past 2 years. These range from random killings to an 18-year-old murdering his parents and 3 younger siblings, a child being raped and murdered, and everything in between. It's honestly terrifying and just horrific. So 29-year-old Russell Keith Dardeen is ready to get his family out of there. He's married to 30-year-old Ruby Elaine Dardeen. They both go by their middle names. Together, they have a 3-year-old named Peter. And Elaine is pregnant. They're expecting a baby girl in just a few weeks, whom they plan to name Casey. So Keith is making plans to move his young family out of the area. He's already making plans to move his family back to his hometown of Mount Carmel in January. It's definitely not Plan A. They really seem to love their community. Keith works at the local water treatment plant, and he's the lead singer at their church. Elaine works part-time at an office supply store, and she also plays the piano at their church right alongside Keith. They have some roots here, so leaving isn't easy. But Keith just feels this urge to be proactive and protect his family. All of his family lives about 80 miles away in Mount Carmel, and he tells his mom, Joanne Dardeen, about the murders in the area, the crime, and he says there's just too many things happening.
He said, we're going to move our mobile home, and we're going to move back to Mount Carmel in January. I said, why are you coming back? He said, there's just too many things happening down here. There's people being murdered and robbed and just all kinds of meanness. And he said, I don't like it.
That quote is from an article by Bob Cyphers and Sarah Benora for First Alert 4 News. It goes on to explain that Joanne had just spent the weekend visiting in Ina with everyone. She said, quote, "It was odd. We'd usually end up talking about murders. I know you might think that's crazy, but me and him were really into a lot of murder cases, you know, and things happening to people." End quote. I'm sure she could have never imagined that it would be the last time she ever saw them, that she'd never be able to hold her new granddaughter, that nearly 40 years later, people would be talking about the murder in her family. It really is just haunting. But just days after getting back home, on Tuesday, November 17th, Joanne got a call that made her heart drop. Well, calls, plural, actually. It was Keith's boss. He said Keith was a no-call, no-show at his night shift at the water treatment plant, and no one could get a hold of him. No one was answering the phone or door at their house. Again, in addition to Keith, there's a woman who's about 7 months pregnant and a 3-year-old. No one could think of where they could all be basically in the middle of the night. So Keith's boss is power calling his parents until Joanne picks up. But she hasn't heard from Keith and can't get a hold of him either. She is immediately scared for all of them, especially given what her son and her had just spoken about. She ends up calling the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office to express this concern. But nothing really seems to happen in that first call. When she calls again, she directly asks for someone to go to the house to check on them. While the sheriff's office is making their way to the Dardeen home, so are Keith's parents with the key to the house. They finally get there at 6:30 p.m. on now Wednesday, November 18th. When the deputy gets to the home, there's no answer at the front door. There's also no apparent signs of any forced entry. In fact, when they go to open the back door, it's unlocked. Now, again, I will warn you that what they see inside is incredibly disturbing. Probably the most disturbing scene I've ever described on this podcast. When the deputy shines their flashlight inside the bedroom, they find what appears to be Elaine, Peter, and Casey tucked into bed. But as they get closer and see more, when they see blood, they realize that all 3 are deceased. They'd been bound and bludgeoned to death with a baseball bat. It seemed that Elaine had gone into labor, delivered Casey, the umbilical cord had been cut, and then they were both killed. Elaine had not been sexually assaulted as far as they could tell, but her genitals had been mutilated. Out of respect for this family, I'm not going to go into more detail. It's obviously just absolutely brutal. But after they were killed, whoever did this tucked them neatly into their waterbed. Almost really positioned them in a way to make it look like they could be peacefully sleeping. Cash and jewelry were left openly visible in the home. Again, there was no sign of any forced entry, and nothing appeared to be missing. Except for Keith Dardeen, who immediately became their primary suspect. This episode of Voices for Justice is brought to you by Quince. I've been trying to be more intentional about what I wear each day. I'm leaning into pieces that feel effortless, comfortable, and still put together, and Quince has been my go-to. The fabrics feel elevated, the fits are flattering, and everything just works without overthinking it. They use premium materials like 100% European linen, organic cotton, and ultra-soft denim. And the best part? Everything is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They work directly with ethical factories and cut out the middlemen, so you're paying for quality and craftsmanship, not brand markup. I recently just ordered their tiered linen dress, of course in black. I wanted to pair it with one of my favorite pairs of brown wedges. The problem was, I didn't have a brown purse. So I got that from Quince too. It's one of my favorite outfits. It's easy, effortless, and feels amazing, especially as we're getting a little bit warmer here in Phoenix. Refresh your everyday with luxury you'll actually use. Head to quince.com/justice for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/justice for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/justice.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
The crime happened in this mobile home in 1987. Investigators say the Dardeen family was brutally murdered. Elaine and their son Peter were bound and beaten to death. Elaine, 7 months pregnant at the time, prematurely gave birth during the beating to a little girl who was also killed.
Articles ran in the local papers stating that Keith Dardeen was being sought for questioning in the triple homicide. There were quotes from friends, family, even his employer about what a good and upstanding man he was. Everyone who knew him was in disbelief that this happened in the first place, and that anyone thought he could be to blame. Here's a clip of Keith's mother and his lifelong friend Kevin Davis discussing exactly that.
In a situation like that, if the husband's missing, he's the one that did it. And of course, they could not find him, they could not locate him.
It rattled me. I'll be the first to admit it rattled me completely, But I said, there's no way I could even give any credibility to that thought whatsoever, because I knew he couldn't have done that. He just could not have ever done something like that.
I mean, with nothing missing from the scene but Keith and his family vehicle, it makes sense that they would be focused on finding him. But he's not the person who murdered his family. Keith was found in a field by hunters the following day, about a mile from his home. He'd been shot 3 times in the face and castrated. The family vehicle was found the next day, 10 miles south of the Dardeen home. There was blood inside, but where it was found is one of the most chilling aspects of this case, in my opinion. Whoever did this parked it not just in full view for anyone to find, but specifically right in front of the Benton Police Department, which was right next door to the Franklin County Courthouse. It seemed that whoever committed these horrific crimes was outright taunting the police with this placement. Or maybe they were begging to get caught. Either way, between all the crime scenes, about 150 items were taken and placed in evidence bags, and the coroner ultimately determined that all 4 of the family members had been killed within an hour of each other, with Keith being killed inside the family vehicle and later placed in the field. But it was unclear who was killed first. Some have speculated that maybe Keith was made to watch his family be killed before facing the same fate. His mother has wondered if maybe the killer wanted him to do something for them, like sell drugs, but he refused, and that's what got them all killed. But the truth was, investigators had no idea why this happened or who did it. Now, because this was the year 1987, because these killings were so brutal and involved genital mutilation, detectives brought in an expert on cults to consult on the investigation. This was really around the height of what has since been coined satanic panic in the United States. It's a pretty interesting topic that I'm researching for my Dark Truth series on Patreon, because I do think it has greatly impacted how many cases around this time were being investigated. There's a lot to dive in there that wouldn't all make sense for this episode. But to keep it brief, there was a belief at this time that certain things like the role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons and heavy metal music were being used as tools to recruit mostly young people to commit crimes like this. Some of these studies were even receiving federal funding. Again, that is a very simplified way of looking at it. But the point I'm trying to get at here is that at this time, the idea that the Dardeen family may have been killed in some type of ritual was pretty par for the course in something as shocking as this. Especially because there didn't seem to be any other motive. They weren't robbed, there was no sexual assault other than the mutilations, and as far as investigators could tell, neither Keith nor Elaine had any enemies or secrets that would lead to violence like this. Neither of them was having an affair, and they were often described as being open books who truly enjoyed spending time with family and at their church. I mean, outside of a little weed found in their home, they seemed like a pretty picture-perfect family who did everything by the book. These sentiments were backed by both their family and officials. Jefferson County Sheriff Bob D. Pitchford told the St. Louis Dispatch back in 1987 that the family's reputation in the community was outstanding. In the same article, a local business owner named Claudia Johnson came forward to discuss how often Elaine shopped in her store, CJ's New and Used. She also discussed how the family had won their community Halloween costume contest 2 years in a row. They dressed up as characters from The Wizard of Oz in 1986 and Ghostbusters in 1987. She said, quote, "If I could say anything that really summed up this family, they were a nice couple," end quote. Detective Captain Mike Anthus, who led the charge early on, has said directly that there was no immediate or direct motive in this case, while Captain Bobby Wallace would later speculate that the crime was meant to, quote, "send a clear message to somebody," or it was extremely personal, end quote. Locals speculated that it was a random act of violence, that the entire village of Ina was prone to crime due to being surrounded by 2 major freeways, one to the east and the other to the west, but they didn't find any evidence pointing to any theory. There seemed to be just nothing, and the case grew cold. It became just another part of Ina's horrific history. I told you earlier that there had been 15 homicides in the area within 2 years of the Dardeen family being killed. But that history goes back even further. The Haight-Sweeten double murder gripped Ina, Illinois in the summer of 1924 and became one of the most sensational scandals of its time. Coal miner Wilford Jack Sweeten suddenly fell ill after a day trip with his wife Elsie and died 10 days later. His death was blamed on food poisoning. Just weeks later, Anna Haight, the wife of local Methodist minister Reverend Lawrence Haight, suffered a similar fate and also died. Rumors of an affair between Elsie and the charismatic preacher swirled as suspicions grew. And for good reason. Testing would later prove that both died from arsenic poisoning. And investigators discovered that Haight had recently purchased arsenic under the pretense of killing rats. When confronted with the evidence, Haight first claimed that he'd poisoned his wife out of mercy, but eventually confessed to both murders and implicated Elsie in her husband's death. At first, Elsie denied any wrongdoing, but after a jailhouse conversation with Haight overheard by authorities, she admitted feeding Wilford poison in candy, oatmeal, and tomato soup at Haight's urging. She explained that she was unhappy in her marriage and had fallen under the preacher's spell, mistaking his attention for something almost divine. And this was a huge deal at the time. Their confession shocked the public, drew national reporters, there were folk songs written about this, and crowds so large that women brought picnic baskets to the trial. That trial took place in December 1924. Haight's attorney argued insanity, while Elsie's lawyer painted her as a woman manipulated by a powerful minister. And on Christmas Eve, Haight was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, while Elsie got 35 years. But her story didn't end there. In 1927, the Illinois Supreme Court granted her a new trial, ruling that she should have been tried separately. This time, her written confession was excluded, and despite testimony about her earlier admissions, a jury quickly acquitted her. She walked free after 3 years behind bars, while Reverend Haight remained in prison for life. The case remains one of Illinois' most infamous murder scandals to this day. I mean, for such a small village, Ina definitely has a rich record of murder. And it wasn't just before the Dardeen family was murdered. There was another case that you should be familiar with if you've listened to this podcast for some time. In 1993, Susan Lund's partial remains were found in a park in Ina, specifically just her head. You may remember her case from my episode discussing her identification a few years back. She was last seen on Christmas Eve in 1992 in Clarksville, Tennessee, but remained unidentified for decades. While we now know her as Susan Lund, her case remains unsolved. There was clearly something happening in Jefferson County around this time, but again, the Dardeen case just went cold. Despite thousands of hours being dedicated to this case by investigators, they just couldn't find the right pieces to complete this puzzle. over a decade passes with no tangible leads. Until the year 2000, when a man in Texas confessed to the murders. This episode of Voices for Justice is sponsored by Chewy. If you have pets, you probably know about Chewy, and you also know that when they say that they have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy, they're not messing around. To keep them happy, Chewy has over 100,000 products from all the brands my pets love at prices I love. To keep them healthy, Chewy offers pet prescriptions, pet insurance, telehealth vet visits, and they're even rolling out vet clinics across the country. I've been shopping with them for a very long time. And in addition to the auto-ship feature that gets the dog's food to them every single month, I also love to experiment with different treats. But I'm a bit picky. For me, it has to be high quality with simple ingredients. I recently picked up treats from Shepherd Boy Farms that are 100% just chicken breast. Popcorn and Heber are already obsessed. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. And right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney. That's chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney to save $20 on your first order with free shipping. chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details.
What they did to your family, you're lucky to make it out alive.
Streaming on Peacock.
These men are going to come after me. Taking them out is my only chance.
Put a bullet in her head.
From the co-creator of Ozark.
Looks like a family was running drugs.
Execution-style killing, it's rare for the Keys. Any leads on who they might have been running for?
The cartel killed my family. I'm gonna kill them. All of them.
MIA. Streaming now. Only on Peacock.
This man, detectives say, confessed to committing one of the most heinous crimes in the history of Jefferson County, Illinois. He's a 35-year-old drifter named Tommy Lynn Sells.
Well, this is a small community where everybody knows everybody, and it'll be a relief to all the community to know that the person responsible for this or been accused of this, and we got to realize he is not guilty until he's been proven guilty in court.
Investigators say Tommy Lynn Sells is a serial killer. The 35-year-old drifter is already accused of murders in Kentucky, Arizona, Texas, Southwest Missouri, and now suspected in Illinois.
So how did all of this happen? Well, let's take a step back and go across the country to Del Rio, Texas on December 31st, 1999. 13-year-old Katie Harris and her friend 10-year-old Crystal Searles were asleep when 35-year-old Tommy Sells climbed through the bedroom window. He attacked Katie first. He sexually assaulted her, stabbed her, and slit her throat. Then he went for Crystal. She was hiding on the top bunk of the bed, hoping Sells wouldn't see her. According to her interview with CBS, Sells nearly left the room before turning back one last time. And that's when he saw Crystal. She says he just walked over and slit her throat. She pretended to be dead until he left. She said, quote, "And then I just remember laying there and the light turning off, and I heard the door shut. And so I got on my hands and knees and I was crawling across the floor in the bedroom, and I came across Katie on the floor. She was kind of making a gasping noise, or maybe she was choking. But then I was trying to comfort her. I laid next to her, rubbing her back, and that's when I realized I couldn't talk. Because all I wanted to say was, everything's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be okay. But I couldn't. And then, as soon as she stopped making those noises, I had this feeling, Get out of here. Get up. Come on, go. Don't lay here. Go. It was dark outside. I was in my pajamas, no shoes, nothing. And I just decided. I saw a light in the distance. I was like, that's my goal. That's where I need to be. I just got on the road and walked really slow to that light. Really, all I could think about was just get to this house, just get to this house, just get to this house. And I banged on their door and I hear a gentleman. He's like, who's there? Who's there, I can't talk. So I'm just banging as hard as I can on the door. And then he opens the door. End quote. Like Crystal said, she couldn't speak. So she wrote on a notepad, "The Harrises are hurt. Please hurry." In another note, she wrote, "Will I live?" That is one of the hardest quotes I've ever had to read. It is nothing short of heartbreaking, but Crystal did survive and is truly a hero. If you want to learn more about her case, I highly encourage you to listen to and watch the interview she's given about what happened to her and to Katie that night. Crystal later worked with a forensic artist to create a sketch of cells, and he was caught about 24 hours later. When he said that he was happy to be caught and that he was tired from committing all these crimes. Now, Crystal wasn't his only victim to escape. In 1992, a 19-year-old woman named Fabian Witherspoon took pity on Sells when she found him under an overpass holding a sign that read, "I will work for food." She says Sells showed her a photo of who he said was his wife and children, so she invited him to her home to serve him a warm meal. Once inside, Sells grabbed a knife and tried to rape her. But she fought back. She hit him over the head and stabbed him. Sells in turn hit her over the head with a piano stool, which rendered her unconscious. The next thing she remembered was waking up in the hospital. It turns out that she hurt Sells pretty badly. He also ended up in the hospital, and then in police custody. He took a plea deal, served 5 years, and was released in 1997. 2 years later, he committed the second murder he would be convicted of. In April 1999, in San Antonio, Texas, Sells kidnapped 9-year-old Mary Beatrice Perez, sexually assaulted, and killed her. Sells was sentenced to death for the murder of Katie Harris in September 2000, and he was given a life sentence in prison for killing Mary Beatrice Perez in 2003. This is when he began confessing to killing dozens of people. So what did he say about the Dardeen family? Well, let's dive into it, because it was and still really is a hot topic of debate. But here's what we know. He specified the exact seat in the family vehicle where he says he killed Keith Dardeen. However, physical evidence has disproved this claim. Sells described a set of watermelon ceramics found inside the Dardeens' home. This is something investigators say was not known to the public at this time. When asked more questions about details of the crime that were not known to the public, Sells began giving incorrect answers followed by correct answers, leading some investigators to believe that he was just guessing. Sells also claimed that Keith picked him up at a truck stop in Mount Vernon and invited him back to his home to have some type of sexual encounter with Elaine. However, his story later changed, saying that they met at a pool hall. Either way, he says he killed Keith in a fit of rage following a sexual advance, and then returned back to the Dardeen home later to eliminate any witnesses. Now, this idea of this sexual encounter is something that Keith's mother, Joanne, has adamantly rejected, saying it would have been extremely out of character for her son. And this really is also backed by Sells' own statements. He was vague about exactly what happened, but years later he told private investigator Bill Clutter that the family had been targeted in some type of larger conspiracy, possibly alluding to drugs. He added that if the police had searched the woods near the home after the murders, they would have found a pile of beer cans where Sells waited and watched the family before murdering them. So take all of that for what you will. It really seems that it was the set of watermelon ceramics that gets most people and most investigators. That's what sealed the deal for Clutter. He says he believes Sells killed the Dardeen family. And most investigators in Jefferson County felt the same way, so they made the case to the Jefferson County Attorney's Office, who denied taking the case. They cited a questionable confession and no physical evidence, which I do think is important to note. Many items from the scene were sent off for testing in this case, and not a single one has been matched to Sells. it was also proven by DNA that Sells was not the perpetrator of other murders he confessed to. It's hard, but I do think former prosecutor Gary Duncan summed it up pretty well. He said that while they couldn't completely discount Sells, there was still a, quote, fair possibility that the actual killer may still be out there, end quote. In an interview with the Hometown Register, Joanne said, quote, I am 99% sure that Sells is the one who murdered them, but there is 1% of doubt still in my mind, end quote. Joanne did reach out to Sells trying to get these answers for herself. She wrote him a letter and asked if he'd meet with her, but she never received a response. She said, quote, I need him to tell me face to face that he's the one who killed them, and I want him to tell me exactly what he did to them, end quote. Sells made several attempts to escape his death sentence and to be declared mentally unfit, but he was unsuccessful. Joanne said that she wanted to be present for the execution, saying, quote, I don't think it'll bother me in the least. Maybe it sounds like I'm cold-hearted, but when I stop and think about everything, her and that baby, and how brutally they were all murdered, it's been over 20 years, but you don't forget. Your mind wanders on it. I think I will probably feel like it's finally over with, end quote. Joanne was not present for the execution, but in 2014, Sells was executed without being convicted of the Dardeen murders or any others. So who killed Keith, Elaine, Peter, and Casey Dardeen? Well, 30 detectives worked the case full time, which is an incredible amount of resources to dedicate to a single case. They interviewed over 100 people and looked into over 1,000 leads. They entered about 150 items into evidence, sent many of them off for testing, but they had nothing, not a single suspect outside of the possibly false confession of a murderous man who, in some circumstances, appeared to be confessing to crimes he didn't commit. This investigation is still considered to be open and active, and is still with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. In that office, there are 21 4-inch binders filled with case files. However, in an interview Joanne gave to KFVS 12 News in 2019, she said she was confident that no one was actively working the case anymore. In fact, she and Keith's sister Anita still had questions about the case that they say authorities wouldn't answer. Apparently, a 2015 police report from Mount Carmel, Keith's hometown, indicated that some disturbing writing about the case was found under some old wallpaper. They wanted more answers about this. Joanne said, quote, I tried to talk to the state police about it because they're the ones that come and cut it out, and I couldn't get anything out of him, end quote. That question was brought to Jefferson County. They said that lead was explored, it did not appear to be related, but they retained the evidence. And Anita wanted to know about DNA testing. That question was also brought to the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. They said they did want to do further testing, and think they can. But whether or not that actually happened is unclear. Really, in the end, it seems that most of what we have is speculation, and a lot of unanswered questions. As of 2022, Joanne Dardeen was still advocating for the case at the age of 84. She said she still keeps in contact with investigators, and as they told her back in 1987, she believes keeping the case in the public eye is crucial to solving it. Which brings me right to our call to action. It's been nearly 40 years since Keith, Elaine, Peter, and Casey Dardeen were brutally murdered. Please share their case. I know it's not an easy one to hear or to talk about. This was by far one of the hardest cases I've ever researched and reported on because of how gruesome it is. But it's important that we don't let it fade from the media. That we keep the pressure on to keep testing these items as technology advances. I mean, even from 2019 when Jefferson County said that they may do testing, to me recording this episode in 2025, we've seen some major technological advances in forensic testing. But we know resources are limited. We also know that the cases who tend to get those resources are the ones with the loudest advocates. So please take a moment out of your day to share this episode. Share an article, a flyer. Share anything about the Dardeen family in hopes that some of those resources will be allocated to help find more answers for Keith, Elaine, Peter, and Casey. As a reminder, the Dardeen family was killed on or about November 17, 1987 in Ina, Illinois. Their case remains unsolved. Anyone with information is asked to call the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office at 618-244-8004. But as always, thank you, I love you, and I'll talk to you next time. Voices for Justice is hosted and produced by me, Sarah Turney, and is a Voices for Justice media original. If you love what we do here, please don't forget to follow, rate, and review the show in your podcast player. It's an easy and free way to help us and help more people find these cases in need of justice. Welcome to the Secret After Show. The studio door is open, and our emotional support puppies, Popcorn and Heber, are in the room. Popcorn is literally in my lap. I definitely needed some puppy cuddles after this episode. This is such a dark case, such a dark crime. I mean, every crime within this crime that I discussed was just so dark and horrific, and I didn't even go into all of the murders that Sells confessed to. I try to keep it relevant to this episode, which is hard. You know, the balance between keeping the focus on the family that the episode's about and highlighting all the victims is hard. But as always, I did my best. And again, I do just want to reiterate that while it is extremely difficult to discuss, it's hard to hear, it's important to highlight, and it is important to share. It's just so terrible. And either way, if you think Sells did this or somebody else, this family deserves more answers. The next thing I have on my list is false confessions are hard. They are so tough. I mean, we know that Sells was basically proven wrong, that DNA led to other perpetrators in some of the cases he confessed to. But especially in a case like this, where there's just like almost no evidence, it seems. I mean, I don't know how you have 150 items bagged for evidence and you don't have any outside DNA. I have to believe that maybe they do and they're not telling the public, that maybe they're just, keeping it under wraps until they can make a definite connection or something. I don't know. This is a really tough one, and I feel like overall, false confessions are something that we're always going to have to deal with in true crime. That these families are always going to have to deal with in true crime. I mean, when you have someone who clearly murdered at least 2 people, if not more, when they're sentenced to life and they're sentenced to death, what else do they have except, time, the desire for fame, maybe, fortune, recognition, maybe a day out of their cell, maybe some fast food if they talk about these other cases. I don't know what the perfect solution is, but it seems like when these people are driven to these false confessions, like there's just so much for them to gain and so little for them to lose. And again, I don't know if there is a solution, what a perfect solution might look like. It just messes up these cases so hard. And I'm not saying he did or didn't do it. I'm kind of split. I always tend to, try to see the family side. And I know that Joanne believes 99% that Sells did this, so I am inclined to believe that it's likely that he did. It just makes it hard. If he did confess to this crime, he definitely lied about others. So it just puts everything in question, which, again, I keep saying it's so hard, but I don't know how else to describe it. It's just incredibly difficult. And I'm always sending so much love to these families who have to deal with it. As someone who has dealt with a false confession with a man who very similarly was sentenced to life for a murder and then began confessing to a bunch of crimes, a bunch of murders, some of which it's been proven that he didn't do. Some of these victims have come back alive. I think it's one of the cruelest things you can do because it leaves this perpetual wondering. And on top of all the grief and complex emotions that come with these cases, it's just, I think, one of the worst things a human can do outside of the crimes themselves. But, as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think of false confessions? Why do you think they do it? Do you think most of them are credible? Do you think most of them are not credible? I know it's a case-by-case type of basis thing, but I would love to hear from you. I have a very unique, I think, perspective on true crime, and sometimes I don't see things the way that everybody else does, so please let me know what you think. Now on to media discrepancies. Really, there were some smaller media discrepancies that were mostly cleared up by investigators or by the family. And really overall, it was pretty good reporting as far as I could tell. There was nothing glaring that made me want to come here and rant to you guys to talk about the discrepancies. Again, overall, pretty solid reporting. Now on to our hero of the episode, which is Joanne, obviously. I mean, my goodness, what a standout. At the age of 84, and that was 2022, so she, is pushing 90, right? About 87 now. For advocating for so long and being so public facing in the media. And not only that, right? Being there really from day one. She's the person that Keith's employer called. She and her husband, I will say his name is Don. They, went to the scene with the key. They were ready to go help right away. And they, stood by them this entire time and for decades and decades. And to have to do that, is so hard, to live in that constant state of grief, that constant state of, again, I can't speak for her, but, just this being at the top of your mind all the time, doing these interviews, just it never being laid to rest like it should be, is so hard. So our hero of the episode is Joanne for fighting so hard for so long. I am ready for a segment of hope, though. I need a segment of hope this week, so let's go on to our segment of hope. This is from Arizona, from AZ Central, right in my backyard, from September 9th, 2025, an article written by Jose R. Gonzalez. The title reads, Tip Leads to ID of Human Remains Found Under Concrete Slab in Northwest Arizona. And I'm going to tell you guys, I've read a few articles about this, and I have I have so many questions. So this is going to leave you unsatisfied. I'm just going to tell you that up front. But it is a step closer to hopefully a solve, a step closer to answers, which is why it makes our segment of hope. But the article reads, a man whose body was found under a concrete slab with a gunshot wound in Mojave County has been identified years later after a woman phoned investigators with a decades-old tip. Human remains were discovered in August 2021 in Dolan Springs, located more than 200 miles northwest of Phoenix, by a property owner breaking up a concrete slab in his yard, according to the Mojave County Sheriff's Office. Working with the University of Arizona's Anthropology Department, the Sheriff's Office determined that the remains were a white or Hispanic man, older than 40, between 5 feet 7 inches and 5 feet 9 inches. He was thought to have been buried for at least 10 years, and the cause of death was determined to be a gunshot to the head, according to the Sheriff's Office. Efforts to identify the man through genetic genealogy failed, so the Sheriff's Office posted a Facebook request for information on the victim. The case finally netted a lead July 26 when a woman called investigators and said her parents resided on the same street as where the remains were found, and that the man who lived with them there was about 27 years ago, and that there was a man who lived with them there about 27 years ago who suddenly disappeared, the Sheriff's Office said. The woman recalled his name was Chet Williams. She said her parents told her Williams had left, which she found odd since all his belongings remained behind, according to the Sheriff's Office. The woman also said that shortly after Williams left, her parents poured a slab of concrete at their home, the Sheriff's Office said. Property records showed that the woman's parents owned the property where the man's remains were found. Investigators also found that a man named Chet G. Williams had used that address as his residence. The woman's parents, Alvin Hamilton and B. Hamilton, died in 2006 and 2018, respectively, according to the Sheriff's Office. With this information, a forensic genealogist with Othram Inc., a Texas-based genetic lab, located the names of relatives of Williams on the East Coast, who verified that Williams moved to Arizona to reside with a woman named B. Hamilton, according to the Sheriff's Office. A DNA sample from one of Williams' relatives was given to Othram. It matched the remains found on the Hamiltons' property, according to the Sheriff's Office. They keep saying that. On September 4th, the genealogist revealed to investigators that the Dolan Springs victim was Chester G. Williams III, also known as Chet Williams. Based in the Houston area, Othram offered its help through Project Grace, which covered costs including the creation of a DNA profile from a victim sample, the uploading of information into a genealogy database, and the investigation by a forensic genealogist, the Sheriff's Office said. And that's where the article ends. So my goodness, what a revelation. And I have to say that there are like heroes within this segment of hope too, right? One, this woman for literally like basically turning her parents in for whatever probable involvement they had in this case. 2 for Othram, right? 3 for Project Grace. I mean, just and the Sheriff's Office, the Sheriff's Office said we have to include them. The combination it took to make this discovery is just incredible. And I know that these people have since passed, but I really hope that Chet's family gets some more answers. I mean, I'm glad he's identified. Now they do have at least, the answer to where he was laid to rest. But my gosh, what a crazy revelation. And I really hope that they continue to work this case and that they, I don't know, like I said, just find some more answers. But it does make our segment of hope because he was identified, and because it personally gave me hope that, I think specifically that this woman was willing to basically turn in her family. I think we don't see it enough in true crime. I do think a lot more of these crimes would be solved if families were more honest about things, if they were more forthcoming with the police. So good on her. I really good on her for doing that. But as always, thank you. I love you, and I'll talk to you next time.